Hi, in today's class we are going to talk about the OpenMRS data model and how OpenMRS stores the information and data about the patient in the EMR system. So, OpenMRS is a flexible EMR platform, but what is it that gives it flexibility? It is a data model which is based on an entity attribute value concept. I won't get into the concept in this class, but I'll tell you how the data model is organized. OpenMRS is an enterprise platform which is hosted on a web server. It is accessed through a web browser, and different examples of web browsers are Firefox, Google Chrome, and Internet Explorer, and it is shared across the enterprise. So, it is a Java web application. It runs on different kinds of web servers, but the database is generally deployed on MySQL, although it supports other kinds of database servers as well. So, while OpenMRS has a one-to-one relationship between the entities and the database tables, this is not necessarily the most efficient way to design databases, but because it is designed in a way that new contributors can understand the data model easily, you will find a one-to-one mapping between each entity and its responsible table in the database. For example, if you look at the person entity, there is a person table in the database. Similarly, for the user entity, there is a user table in the database. This means that whenever you look at a Java class and you look at the different methods that are there in this, or the different attributes that are there in the class, you will find a corresponding column in the database table, which makes it very easy for new contributors to contribute to the code, as well as for users to understand how the data model works. So, please click on the link that you see here and zoom into the diagram. So, I will just click on this link. What opens up is the OpenMRS wiki, which is the place where we have all the kinds of documentation. So, what you see here is the OpenMRS model. It is fairly complex in its architecture, because it covers all the different domains, and that domain model gives it the flexibility to design different kinds of EMR systems. We will particularly zoom at a few, and you will be able to understand how this is organized. So, I will show you two examples. The first one is the patient model, or the patient entity and the patient domain and the different tables in it. So, you can see like the patient identifier type that is in it, the patient identifier table, the patient table, the visit type table, and a few more. So, that is the patient domain. So, whenever you zoom in, you will see a specific section that is on a domain, and that domain then has a few tables. Similarly, you can see the form table here, the form domain here, which has multiple tables like the form field, the form table, the field answer, the field table, and each of these tables then have different columns in it. So, let us try to zoom in into the patient table. So, the patient table has the patient ID, which is the internal identifier for the table, and then you have which is the primary key, and then you have tribe, creator, date created, changed by, date changed, voided, and voided by, and then you have date voided and voided reason columns. Each of these columns have different data types, and as we get into the data and the metadata lecture, I will be explaining to you in depth of what each of these columns mean. But broadly, to be able to understand how the data model looks like and it works like, you should be able to understand the following. So, you have different domains in which OpenMRS entities are organized, and so the data model is organized in the same way. We start with concept domain. So, these are defined and used to support coded data through the system. You can look at the concept dictionary class or the concept dictionary lecture, and you will be able to understand more about concepts. Encounters are metadata that are used for providers to do an intervention with a patient. So, all that information about all the interaction of the system with a patient is stored in the encounter tables. A form is essentially a user interface, and so all the form fields, all the form concepts are all part of the form domain model. Observations are the actual health information about a patient that are stored in the system. So if someone has a systolic blood pressure of a certain value, so systolic blood pressure is the concept, but its actual value becomes the observation, and that value is then stored in the observation table in the database. Then there are things like orders. These are what these could be different types of orders. So there could be drug orders, there could be lab orders, there could be procedural orders and things like that. And so they are all combined together in the order domain. Then there's the patient domain, which includes details beyond what the basic information about that is about the patient is, but the person domain includes things like the first name, last name, middle name, their gender, their date of birth, and things like that. The last part is the business and the workflow parts. And as you get into the business and the workflow lectures, we'll explain those in depth to you. There's also an accessible web version of the data model. So if you click on this link, you'll be able to see a textual version of the data model instead of an image. And so it's much more easier to scan through each of these, but it does not show you the association that you can see in an entity relational diagram. But it also tells you more details, like if you click on this link, it will tell you the primary key of the table where it's linked to, and so the user table is linked to the person who made the change. So I hope you enjoyed the class, and I'll see you in the next lecture.